joining us for another episode of Outcomes Beyond the Fill, your source for insights on pharmacy and health plan updates and strategy. I'm Shane.
And I'm Amit.
We'll be your guides today as we dive into industry trends and company initiatives shaping the population health space. To start off, thought we would give you a minute to let you know who you're hearing from today. So I can introduce myself. My name is Shane Hallengren. I'm a senior product manager at Outcomes. I've been with Outcomes for 14 years in a variety of roles, and just recently made the transition over to the product team. So it's been exciting to kind of learn a new aspect of the business and kind of build on some of the knowledge I've had previously. And then Amit, you want to let the listeners know a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name's Amit Patel. I am a pharmacist by trade, but now I am in the MTM field. I've been in the MTM field for, about 10 years or so, but with Outcomes, I've been with Outcomes for a little over a year. Yeah, I think I just hit my year mark a few weeks ago, so
Hey,
excited about that. Yeah, but this is my first time being in a sales position, so I'm the executive sales representative here for our payer unit at Outcomes, and basically, interacting with all these incredible health plans, leadership in health plans, trying to be able to help their memberships and how we can help those memberships from an outcome standpoint. Specifically, most recently was the Medicaid conference I went to.
Yeah, absolutely. I think coming out of that conference, Amit, you and I had just some kind of like water cooler conversations where we were diving into a little bit about, assessments, meaning like health risk assessments and social determinants of health. So I know some of that kind of came from some of your observations at the conference. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the show that you went to and, what you were hearing?
Yeah, so we went to the Medicaid Innovations Forum. I believe this was the 17th annual one they had this past year in February, and it was in St. Pete, Florida. It was colder in St. Pete, Florida than in my home state of Denver, Colorado, so that was one thing. And around that time, we've had a very strange winter season.
Yeah, no kidding.
But I gotta say, the Medicaid Innovations Conference was eye-opening. I think everything that it kind of really stemmed from was that they are living in a different reality of what Medicaid used to be and what it is going to be moving forward. I think the Big Beautiful Bill definitely changed a lot of things for people in that Medicaid space. And it's kind of reshaped how we think of like redeterminations, equity mandates, workforce constraints, and also member engagement and member contactability, I think, is the main thing that I've learned a lot from the Medicaid Innovations Forum.
Yeah, the contactability is always a challenge, I know, in the Medicaid space. But, as we've been kind of talking about this, what's kind of stood out to me is in my prior role here at Outcomes, I spent the last 6 years managing payer program performance, which had me focused really heavily on CMR and adherence, and particularly in the Medicare space. Not exclusively, but spent a lot of my energy in Medicare over the past 6 years. And obviously, we've heard a lot about HRAs and social determinants of health in that space as well. So, HRAs have obviously been pretty newsy over the past year when we talk about kind of the strategic role that they've started to play in kind of risk adjustment strategies. But I think it's just really interesting to see that, Medicaid is starting to focus in on it as well, kind of following the trend that we saw in the Medicare space. And it's just so interesting. We hear about, like what are the strategic outcomes that plans are trying to get to with these HRAs and social determinants of health, whether that's a Medicare or Medicaid plans. And, it's just so crucial, I think, to recognize that whatever strategy you might have, there's a really important core to both of these things. And these are ways to surface challenges that are impacting the health and the experience of the members of these plans.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think we're definitely moving to a healthcare outreach system where it's beyond just the conditions. It's everything, you know, around those conditions, whether it is, stability of what the household's like, stability of travel, stability of like family needs.
Hmm.
So I think all of those things stem, you know, and have all of those indirect or direct, consequences to people's health conditions. And I think people are seeing that more and more as we're getting even more data coming in. So,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think again, just kind of speaking to my recent experience in the Medicare space, a lot of that same stuff plays out over there as well. I think that especially with HRAs, one of the big strategic value of those is calling out all of these kind of health risk gaps, behavioral issues that you were just kind of outlining there, Amit. And I think what's really exciting and obviously like really crucial is there's a version of these assessments that just kind of become a check the box activity, right? Let me just make sure to
yeah.
get this conversation completed with the patient, document the information, but that's an important first step, but should really be just the first step, right? And
Hmm.
I think where we really start to get value out of these assessments is when we are really smart, really thoughtful about what that data is telling us, and then trying to tie some meaningful action to what that's telling us.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think that's the sentiment that I was hearing from the Medicaid Innovations Forum, from other health plans is, what are we going to do with all of this data, right? Like, how are we going to execute upon it to be able to take action and help our membership populations, help our most marginalized populations, and help them with their health conditions? I think we're obviously seeing those close in those assessments and surveys. But I think like one of those things, I think SDOH, right? I think everyone talks
Hmm.
about SDOH. Um, I feel like it's been a buzzword for a while
Yeah, yeah,
in our sector, but I think now it's coming to a point of, okay, what are we going to do with this information? Are we going to address, the cost issues or the food and transportation issues, or even social isolation, which I think is something that is growing immensely in
yeah,
our, from generation to generation now. um, and I think that's the part where a lot of people are wanting to know, okay, we know about SDOH in a conceptual way, but do we really understand what it's going to do in an operational way and on executing some of those gaps? Because it's great that we're learning about those gaps, but what are some of the functional parts that we can do as a health plan, or we can, create as a company for like outcomes? What are some of the things that we're doing that can really help fill those gaps in for when we're seeing those gaps occur, right? So I think
yeah,
that's the interesting part that everyone's thinking about, like, because if we can solve those gaps, inherently we can help with the health conditions too.
yeah, yeah. No, I completely agree with you there. Something that kind of hits close to home for me is SDOH and its connections to adherence, right? So
Mhm.
this is something that I've been interested in over the last several years. Is how can plans be really smart, really thoughtful with the types of adherence interventions that they take to their membership, and not trying to make that a one size fits all experience, but instead kind of acknowledging, hey, let's understand that every member is coming from a different spot, and every member might need a different touch point than
Mhm.
the rest of the membership. And the information that SDOH surfaces can kind of help with that, right? So
Mhm.
we can look at somebody who has a transportation issue and think about their adherence through that lens. If they are having trouble getting to the pharmacy, that could be what's driving adherence challenges that they might be experiencing. Maybe related to that, if there's cost concerns that they have based on socioeconomic factors, that could lead you down a different path of what you want to do with each specific member. So it's been that's kind of been in my mind the backdrop and what's kind of happening out in the industry, and it's been really interesting to see in our data here at Outcomes kind of how that's been reflected. So over the past several years, we've been able to deploy some offerings for both social determinants of health and then more recently HRA, and it's been very interesting to see hey, the folks who are having adherence challenges, having challenges in other parts of their care. What are they reporting? What are we hearing back in the assessments that we're doing with them?
What were some of I guess the highest assessments we've seen on our end as far as those barriers?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned this one a little bit earlier because it's right at the top of the list, but transportation is one that we definitely heard a lot about. I'd say transportation, food access, medication access, and then utility is kind of interesting enough as being some of those particular challenges that folks were reporting. But again, I just think this kind of emphasizes it's great that we know that information now, but the next crucial step is, what are you going to do about it, right?
Yeah, and I think that's something that we were seeing at the conference too when discussing with other health plans, and just in general with some of the conversations I've been having with specifically more of those Medicaid health plans or whatnot. And I know that's a big reason why there's this rural health transformation initiative happening the next 5 years too, which I think everyone's still kind of pretty excited about seeing where it goes, but also nervous on how do we implement this? How do we really 100%. Get people, to operationalize this to be able to address some of these issues? Because it isn't news that the rural communities are hurting, right, with the lack of resources, but what are we going to do to help in those areas? And I think that's the part that everyone's wondering is, how do you operationalize this, or who do you partner with to operationalize things like this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the inherent challenges that comes with that is SDOH and HRA, they can be more sensitive conversations, right? 100%. And so I think plans need to be mindful of who they're putting in a position to try to have those conversations with their members. And this also ties in, Amit, what you were just talking about, rural health transformation. And, a big emphasis in that is community-based touch points and taking advantage of underutilized points of care. And I think all of this, we have to trust the person who's trying to talk to us as part of these assessments. We need them available in our community. All just kind of coalesces, I think, in a really nice way around the community pharmacy, right? Which is obviously a space that we focus on a lot here in Outcomes. That's our pharmacy network. We've always kind of promoted and been big believers in the fact that the community pharmacies are just so well positioned to help with the care of a plan's membership, because they have that trusted relationship with the members already. These people are already walking into the door at the pharmacy, filling their scripts. They know the person working behind the counter, have conversations with them as they're picking up their meds. And so that becomes, I think, an easier transition to some of these more sensitive conversations, to be able to do it with somebody who the patient already knows and trusts.
Yeah, and like a lot of times pharmacies are seen as like a pillar of the community, right?
Yeah,
They're one of the most healthcare accessible providers that you can have within a community. There's no appointments, to ask your pharmacist for a question or anything of that nature.
yeah,
And also they're a wealth of knowledge related to the drug information. They're basically
yeah,
that handoff from, what the prescriber wants or what the provider wants to what the patient's actually doing at home. I think people sometimes forget that the number one reason people get hospitalized to begin with is because of non-adherence related to regimens
yeah,
that have already been agreed upon
yeah,
on the primary clinic appointment or whatnot. So I think that's really driving that home again, related to pharmacists, because I think pharmacists are really ready to kind of take that mantle up, and really being able to address those, especially with a lot of independent pharmacies. They're looking
yeah,
for more diverse ways to be able to help with revenue opportunity, where sometimes it comes down to that, to be able to survive and sustain your pharmacy, because sometimes just dispensing the medications aren't enough right now, for a
yeah,
lot of pharmacies, whether that be big pharmacies, small pharmacies, or medium chain pharmacies too. So yeah, I think
yeah,
pharmacies are totally put in a perfect place to help in this, especially in the rural communities, which I'm very passionate about. Growing up in a small town myself in Florida,
mhm,
so it
yeah,
was something that that my parents always needed help with the local pharmacist in that area. And it's just when you're comfortable with that local pharmacist, be able to address some of those questions that maybe you didn't get a chance to ask the provider during that appointment time. I
yeah.
think that's another way that we can really utilize engagement on that platform for completing SDOH and HRA surveys too.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can even just relate to this personally, kind of piggybacking it off what you said about growing up in a small town. I here in Iowa, grew up in a small town, still live in a small town, although larger than the one that I grew up in. But the local pharmacist who works at the local grocery chain, we see him around town, say hi. He knows the family. Say hi to him if we're going in to pick stuff up. So um, it's just like you're saying, a cornerstone of the community, and people know and trust their local pharmacist. But just to maybe add a little bit more there, I think that this really goes to show that pharmacists can play an important role in um, having the initial conversation, and that's great for starting to collect the data. But like
Hmm.
we were just saying, like that's only part of the journey, right? That needs to be
Yeah.
step one. And I think what's also really important to call out is that pharmacists, because of that like expertise and that knowledge that they have, can surface some really important dynamics with each patient, and we've seen that in the SDOH programs that we've run in the past, where when pharmacists are identifying issues, the vast majority of the time they're able to pair the patient with something that helps to address that issue.
I think also related to the conference themes that I think aligned to like pharmacy as a solution is that there is, an access part that we're able to fill in. There's a network abundance that we do have related into, the US. We have like I think above like over 50,000 pharmacies,
Mm-hmm.
right,
Yeah.
Shane, in our network
Yeah.
right now. I feel like we're adding every year
Right.
more and more into our pharmacy. And then also just having, the technology there to support pharmacies, because hey, let's face it, I again coming from the pharmacist background too, you're doing a lot back in the retail setting, right? You're managing dispensing, you got a few medications in the adjudication process, you're maybe behind on pickup times. We need the technology to always be there to support pharmacies to be
Yeah.
continue to be efficient. And I think that's the part that related to our platform, is that we can really create a step-by-step process for our HRAs, for the SDOH conversations, so that we're supporting pharmacies not only to have like meaningful conversations, but also efficient conversations to really get to the root cause of the issues
Yeah.
so that we can really help these members in the long haul. Because if we're not helping, if the members having food issues or, you know, shelter issues or any type of issues related to food access or anything of that sort, you know,
Yeah.
those are going to definitely be a little bit higher on the needs for a patient than
Yeah.
maybe this
Got to
medication
tackle
copay,
those.
you
Yeah.
know. So like that may be one thing that like we really need to focus on is kind of like the hierarchy of needs, right? Like if those other
Yeah.
needs aren't met, you can't think of the next level that you need to follow up on related to your medication adherence, because it isn't like an immediate danger to you right now. But like we
Yeah.
know, hypertension is a silent killer, right?
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
silent, that goes throughout our whole society here in America. And I think it's something that, you know, we always need to try to be on top of. And I think that just comes from education too, for a lot of members, and understanding that, but then also being able to just help them get access to those medications in an easier way,
Yeah.
for those membership populations.
Yeah. And then I think it's also plugging them into other resources that can help them, right? Like whether
Hmm.
that's care coordination offered by the plan, or whether that's like a local resource for food insecurity, or something along those lines. That's needs to be an important part of this as well. And so I think that's something that we're all excited about at Outcomes, that our offerings, especially around social determinants of health, can start to close some of those gaps and plug members in with some of those additional resources that'll help get them on the right path to better outcomes.
Yeah.
And obviously being able to do that in a nationwide, scalable, person-to-person way, is just in our opinion, obviously kind of the winning approach.
Yeah, of course. And I think if I learned anything from this conversation with, you know, amazing leadership from the Medicaid world, honestly, I feel like I've always respected Medicaid a lot, but I feel like I've given them 10 times more respect after talking to them,
Yeah.
especially with, you know, I feel like they're constantly, especially now in more recent years, you're told to do more with less, I feel
Yeah.
like. And I
Yeah.
think in this engagement right now, you know, Medicaid's really having to just meet the members where they're at, you know, whether
Yeah.
those be community group leaders, whether they be you know, other community organizations outside of the traditional organizations that you partnered with. I also think pharmacists too are going to be needing to be partnered with to be able to help close some of these gaps, because I think in these rural communities specifically, most of them are closer to their pharmacies than they are to the prescriber who's maybe a couple hours in the bigger city in that state. You know, I think that pharmacies sometimes are like 20 minutes down the road versus like 2 hours away
Yeah. Yeah.
in the primary care specialist that is seeing them. So I think that's another big part for why it's an untapped resource. And I was shocked when I was at Medicaid Innovations. You know, some of the uh, health plans and some of the state departments didn't really know who outcomes were. And I was like, oh, wow,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Yeah.
There's still people out there who are unsure about our name. And it's kind of great because it's like, oh, this is an extra resource that you could have in, you know, your whole system of levers that you're pulling to engage with patients. And I think that was really enlightening to hear, and really humbling also to hear that, hey, like pharmacies aren't still being utilized in these areas or didn't know that they
Yeah.
can be utilized this way.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think it's just going to be so interesting to see where these assessments go in the future. Again, like we talked about with the Medicare space, we've definitely seen the uh, check a box version of these, and those have their place in a plan strategy, and I can obviously understand that. But the real value with these, and it seems like this is where the Medicaid plans are going to really start seeing the value too, is let's not just collect the data, but let's make sure that we're we're using it, and starting at the pharmacy counter, to your point, Amit, where we can have a member walk right in and ask these questions and engage with a healthcare professional seems like a great place to start. So yeah, really excited to see how this journey continues in the Medicare space, and then how it grows in the Medicaid space as well.
Yeah, and who knows, maybe next year this is all going to be changed and there's going to be something completely different, but we
Yeah.
will definitely be here talking about it. So again, thanks everyone for listening. We're committed to bring you the latest insights in healthcare innovation and strategy. If you found this valuable, subscribe so you don't miss our next episode. And until then, stay curious. This was a great conversation with you, Shane. Thanks again.
Yeah, thanks, Amit.